Ron, I think Taylor Swift is getting peeved. I genuinely believe she was not on Blake's side. It's why Travis Kelce clearly unfollowed Ryan on Instagram. There's been a lot of this drama. Why else would he have done such a thing? It's starting to fall in line, and I wonder if Taylor is going to start working with Justin
Blake. Lively has long been admired as the embodiment of poise and perfection in Hollywood, the woman who could do no wrong. But her recent revelations have painted a startlingly different picture. When she publicly opened up about behind-the-scenes struggles, fans rushed to her defense, moved by what appeared to be rare vulnerability. In interviews, she spoke vividly about being overlooked, unheard, and pushed into uncomfortable situations. Headlines seized the narrative, crowning her as yet another victim of an industry that too often silences women. But as the details come under closer scrutiny, the story she's built begins to crack. Blake alleged that she was pressured into moments she never fully consented to, but insiders tell a different story. Production sources insist she wasn't sidelined at all. In fact, they claim she was deeply involved in shaping key scenes, sometimes even exerting full creative control. Many of the decisions she now describes as forced were, by several accounts, her own. It's a version of events that doesn't align with the helpless image she has presented to the public. Her statements, carefully worded and emotionally charged, drew sympathy with precision. To her fans, she appeared courageous, a woman standing up for herself in a brutal system. But behind the curtain, whispers grew louder. Was this truly authenticity or a calculated strategy to control the fallout? Crew members recall instances when Blake bypassed directors and producers altogether, asserting her authority and reworking scenes to fit her own vision, choices that she would later frame as sources of distress. A pattern began to emerge. Whenever criticism neared her orbit, a new story of victimhood surfaced, redirecting the conversation and neutralizing dissent. By placing her struggles front and center, Blake not only secured public empathy, but also cast doubt on those whose perspectives might complicate hers. It's a powerful tactic. Reframe the narrative so that disagreement looks cruel and scrutiny feels like betrayal. Industry chatter only deepened the contradictions. Scenes she described as uncomfortable improvisations were, according to several insiders, meticulously planned and executed under her watch. That raises the uncomfortable question: was her discomfort genuine or a retroactive rewrite when the optics soured? As more voices from within the production stepped forward, the contrast between her public vulnerability and her private control became impossible to ignore. For a time, her version of events captivated audiences around the world. But the illusion of control has limits. Because in Hollywood, you can decide where your story begins, but you can't always decide where it ends. And that ending came faster than anyone expected. Justin Baldoni's refusal to corroborate her claims didn't just break the silence. It dismantled the narrative entirely. What had once looked like a confession began to resemble a performance. And that's when the unraveling truly began.
Whenever an attorney writes something that is submitted and filed in federal court, they're basically doing it under penalty of perjury. So the judge can do one of two things. The judge can just make a determination that, you know what, there's a dispute as to facts. I'm going to let the deposition happen, but with certain rules, certain parameters that, it doesn't go everywhere. There'll probably be a conference on this with regards, because when it comes to third parties, right? Taylor Swift is not a plaintiff or defendant here, or cross whatever. Judges tend to have some type of more want to protect their own time and privacy. Now, when you have allegations that there's witness tampering or deletion of text messages, which what we call spoliation of evidence, that is a red flag in the eyes of the court, because that takes away from getting to the truth and justice, which I don't know if I'm the one that always brings this up when I come into your show, Andy, but remember she made this claim, like, what I do is protected, and there's this defense of whether or not it's done in bad faith. If there are text messages talking about suing Baldoni, motivations for suing Baldoni, or doing this initial civil rights complaint, that is directly relevant to Baldoni's defense to this California law that supposedly people initially thought, like, oh, that was a huge swing. So I believe the judge is going to be very concerned about these allegations. Will do one of two things: either make a ruling or ask for a conference and ask directly how the attorneys learn this, Now, do the attorneys have to reveal that? They may not have to under what's called the work product doctrine. So there's a lot of involved. But you're right, man. This is a huge...
Justin Baldoni has unexpectedly found himself at the epicenter of Blake Lively's explosive claims. But the way he's handled the storm has been anything but typical. While Hollywood often rewards the loudest voices and tearful televised rebuttals, Justin chose silence. No interviews, no emotional defenses, no rehearsed statements. Instead, he let his actions, and the accounts of those who actually worked beside him, do the talking. And that silence has become its own form of power. Blake painted him as a man who overstepped boundaries and created uncomfortable situations on set. Yet, from every corner of the production, a strikingly different portrait emerged. Professional, respectful, communicative, and deeply mindful of everyone's comfort zones. One insider described how Justin routinely sought consent before making even the smallest adjustment in a scene, ensuring collaboration stayed at the forefront. It's an image that stands in direct contradiction to the chaos Blake implied. The more people spoke, the clearer the divide became. Her version of events suggested disorder. His colleagues described discipline. In an industry that thrives on noise, Justin's refusal to engage publicly became its own statement, calm, deliberate, and unshakably confident. Each quiet day of restraint amplified his credibility, while a steady stream of consistent testimonies solidified his reputation. Behind the scenes, new details surfaced that directly undercut Blake's claims, including an incident she called overwhelming, that witnesses described as carefully managed under Justin's supervision. What she labeled distress, others recalled as diligence. And in that contradiction, the truth began to take shape. Hollywood insiders took notice. Justin's reputation, long built on openness and integrity, stood in stark contrast to the image she was selling. To many, her accusations began to look less like truth and more like strategy, a familiar performance designed to preserve her own carefully curated victim narrative. What tipped the balance even further was the quiet intervention of Taylor Swift, whose subtle yet deliberate gestures of support toward Justin spoke louder than any press statement could. Without ever naming names, her influence reshaped the narrative entirely. This wasn't a shouting match. It was a battle of credibility. And as the noise faded, only one story remained standing. The quiet, consistent one. In the end, what began as Blake Lively's attempt to portray herself as powerless in the hands of others has begun to collapse under the weight of testimonies, quiet resistance, and mounting contradictions. What was once framed as courage now looks increasingly like control. A story crafted not to reveal truth, but to manage perception. And as the facade fractures, Hollywood is left asking the question Blake never wanted to face. Was this ever about justice, or simply about keeping her image intact?
Brian Friedman responded to this. This was a letter where they, it should be noted, this was anonymously sourced, and they're just abusing us again, and this is categorically false, blah, 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 blah. There's no evidence. Meanwhile, it's not signed by Gottlieb. It's not signed, I swear by, this is false. It was signed by Ezra Hudson, a different lawyer, not from that firm, which was odd to me. It was a big red flag. Well, if you're going to come out so fiercely and deny it, maybe get the lawyer who's being accused to deny it themselves. Well, Brian was quick to point that out. In his response this morning that just dropped hot off the presses, we write in response to this letter to strike our motion to ask the court to strike my letter. The letter was submitted in response to Miss Lively's consolidated defendant, Miss Reynolds, together defendants, on purporting to inform the court of their request to intervene in an action pending before a different federal court relating to a motion of Taylor Swift's company, Venable, to quash the subpoena served on them by my office. The premise of the motion is that I made a deliberate and shameless misinterpretation to the court and that the facts set forth in the May 14th letter are false and unfounded. That is not so. Attached here too, as Exhibit 1, is an affidavit executed under penalty of perjury, stating the factual basis for the statements set forth in my letter. Notably, the motion is not signed by Michael Gottlieb. I noticed that too, Brian Friedman, whose conduct gave rise to my office's influence on a subpoena to Taylor Swift's company, but instead by another attorney from a different firm representing Lively. The motion also faults the May 14th letter for being filed without support of any kind, much less anything under oath. This opposition supplies the sworn affidavit that Lively argues the letter lacked. Finally, and most notably, the motion claims that the facts set forth in the 14th letter are unequivocally and demonstrably false, yet is unsupported by any sworn declaration to that effect, much less from Mr. Gottlieb. So basically, he's like saying, well, okay, I just swore that this is all real. Let's hear it from you, Mr. Gottlieb. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. The motion further contends that the letter was improper because it does not seek any form of relief, is irrelevant to any motion currently pending before the court, so there's no legitimate purpose. Of course, the same could be said of the Lively's May 13th letter, which Lively claims to have submitted as a courtesy, in which she did not ask the court to take any action. The Lively defense claim the subpoena served on Taylor Swift seeks the Lively defendant's attorney's communication, including those of Michael Gottlieb, with no explanation as to how they could be relevant in this litigation. Given that Miss Lively herself admits in the letter that she did not ask the court to take any action, nor could she, given that the motion to quash the subpoena is pending there before a separate court, yada, 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 it is apparent the letter filled with the court besmirching the Wayfarer parties and their counsel, our response was necessary. He's like, this is why I'm responding, because this is completely ridiculous. They're doing exactly what we're doing, which they are. This is all both of these parties. It's not just Justin's side. Blake's side is doing it too. They are both playing this in the press. And when Blake's team tries to play like, oh, we're better, we're not doing this, we're not making this a circus. Yeah, come on. Everybody in the industry is laughing at you, Blake and Ryan. You look ridiculous.
Taylor Swift and Blake Lively had long cultivated the image of an unshakable friendship. Public shout-outs, birthday tributes, matching moments of girlhood solidarity. To fans, theirs was a sisterhood beyond question. But as the storm surrounding Blake's allegations grew louder, subtle shifts began to suggest that Taylor might not be standing as firmly in Blake's corner as everyone once assumed. And that realization quietly detonated the narrative. Taylor Swift has built her entire empire on the art of deliberate communication. Nothing she does is spontaneous. Every gesture, every word, every post is calibrated with precision. So when she stayed silent amid Blake's spiraling controversy, that silence spoke louder than any public defense could have. While Blake's claims dominated headlines, fans noticed something strange. Taylor offered no reposts, no likes, no comments. Instead, at the height of the frenzy, she appeared at an event attended by Justin Baldoni, later posting a photo captioned, "Surround yourself with people who lift others." On the surface, it read as harmless inspiration. But to her audience, experts in decoding her language, it sounded like a message with a target. The whispers intensified when Taylor released one of her signature playlists soon after. These curated lists, famous for their hidden meanings, featured songs about deception, empowerment, and clarity amid chaos. The timing, the themes, the tone, nothing about it felt accidental. To those who know Taylor's playbook, coincidence simply isn't part of her vocabulary. Her silence became commentary. Her restraint became statement. Every quiet omission began to look like precision strategy, and as that silence stretched, public perception started to shift. Fans and media alike revisited the inconsistencies in Blake's story, viewing them through a new lens, one framed by Taylor's conspicuous distance. Even her presence on the periphery seemed to spotlight the cracks forming in Blake's narrative. Then came the whispers of an unannounced creative collaboration between Justin Baldoni and members of Taylor's team. A rumor neither side confirmed, but neither denied either. The implication was subtle yet unmistakable. She didn't need to speak to make her stance clear. In the end, Taylor's actions, deliberate, coded, and elegantly restrained, told the story for her. A caption, a playlist, a pointed absence. Each one a brushstroke and a portrait of quiet allegiance to truth over loyalty, integrity over friendship. And in doing so, she didn't just distance herself from Blake's unraveling, she illuminated it. The weight of Taylor Swift's influence made every subtle move exponentially more powerful. When someone with her reach, reputation, and cultural gravity chooses silence over spectacle, the effect reverberates louder than any press statement could. Each understated gesture, every caption, every omission, became part of a pattern too deliberate to ignore. As these signals accumulated, public perception began to shift with startling speed. Taylor's quiet influence acted as a catalyst, intensifying scrutiny and emboldening skeptics who had once hesitated to question Blake's story. By the time the whispers solidified into open industry conversation, it was clear that none of this was random. Taylor's restraint was strategic, measured, consistent, and entirely in character. What began as subtle ripples of doubt soon surged into waves strong enough to reshape the entire narrative. And when the tide finally settled, it left Blake's intentions exposed beneath a harsher, more unforgiving light than ever before.